from where the lines widen, the Gemara says, Ba mineh Rav Yosef bred Rav Nechunya Rav Yehuda, שניים שישנים במיטה אחת, מהו שזה יחסיר פניו ויקרא קריאת שמע, וזה יחסיר פניו ויקרא קריאת שמע. If two people are using the same bed and they're sleeping without clothing on, and the beds are not, we're not talking about a large bed, it's in a way that their bodies are touching each other, can they just turn their backs to each other and say Shema? Or maybe not. In other words, it's pashut, it's simple for the Gemara that you cannot say Shema while your erva is touching the body of your friend, or your body rather is touching the erva of your friend, the private area of your friend. So that for sure you cannot say. Why? Because it causes hirhur, it causes thoughts that troubles your mind, and therefore it's of course not mutar to say Shema in that state. But how about if I turn around now, so the backs are touching to each other? Is that mutar or is that not mutar? Says the Gemara. So Gemara says, Amar lehachi amar Shmuel. I'll tell you what Shmuel paskined in this case. He said, Va'afilu ishto imo. It's mutar not only if you have your friend that is going to be next to you, but even if the one that's next to you is your wife, still is mutar. In other words, Shmuel holds that it is easier to allow a case like this when the one next to you is not your wife, but not only that's mutar, even if the one next to you is your wife, still is mutar to say Shema. You just turn around, she turns around, you turn around, and then you both could say Shema. Says the Gemara, wait a second. You're assuming that your wife is worse than a regular person. Your wife should be much better than a regular person. Says the Gemara, Matkifla Rav Yosef, Ishto velo mibaya acher. Rav Yosef says, well, you want to suggest that Ishto is a chidush that doesn't need to be said that other people is mutar. Even your wife is mutar. Says Rav Yosef, exactly the opposite. Adarabba, Ishto kegufo. Your wife is like a piece of your body. You don't think twice when your wife is next to you. It's something that you're used to. It's something that is ragilba, and therefore you don't have thoughts. If you're saying Shema, you're saying Shema. That should be pashut. So says the Gemara, Metivim, they asked in the Bet Midrash a question from two braitas. You have two braitas that seemingly contradict each other. Shnayim she'yeshanim, the first wide line. Shnayim she'yeshanim b'mita achat. If two people are sleeping in the same bed, ze machzir panav vekore. This one turns around and reads. Veze machzir panav vekore. And the other one also turns around and reads Shema. No problem. That's one braita. Tanya Chariti, and a different braita says, Hayashen b'mita ubanav uvne beto besido. If you're sleeping in the bed and your kids and the family, basically family members, are there on his side in the bed, hareze lo yikra kriyat shema. You cannot possibly say Shema in that state. Ela imken, unless hayta talit mafseket benehen, unless you have a blanket between the bodies and the bodies are not touching, then it's mutar. But if you're under the same blanket and the bodies are touching, then it's not mutar. So in one braita, you tell me if you are together with your wife, then you just turn around and you read, she turns around, she reads Gavaldik. And the other one you say, if you're with your kids, you can't say it until you block between the bodies with a blanket. So you see from here, like who? It's easier to be matir, is easier to allow who? Your wife than even your children. That's what it would seem. Is that like Shmuel or is that like Rabbi Yosef? That's like Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef said, it's easier to allow one to read Shema when he's in bed with his wife when they turn around than to allow it with anybody else. That's what Rabbi Yosef said. Shmuel, however, it will be a little trouble because Shmuel said, even your wife, kol sheken anybody else. How do you read these two braitas together? One of them says clearly your wife is allowed. The other one says even your kids is not allowed. So says the Gemara, just continuing to finish up the braita, and then we get to the answer. The braita continues, but if your kids are minors, we're going to get to what minors means, mutar, then it's mutar. Now, before we explain what minor means in this braita, the Gemara says, Bishlam al Rav Yosef. I understand this based on Rav Yosef, who says it's easier to allow your wife than it is to allow your children or anybody else. That makes a lot of sense. Look, Kasha. One of them is speaking about his wife. And the other braita is talking about anybody else, including your children. But according to Shmuel, who holds that your wife is a chidush and goes without saying that other people is mutar, kasha. I don't have a reconciliation to these two braitas. How do I understand them? Says the Gemara, Amar lecha Shmuel. Shmuel tells you that Rav Yosef milicha. According to Rav Yosef, is it good? According to Rabbi Yosef, it also doesn't make sense. Why? Because there is a third braita. I'm saying this based on the way Rishonim and the Pnei Yehoshua understand it. V'hatanya, that the braita says, Haya yashen b'mita u'banav u'bnei beto b'mita, that if b'nei beto, who is b'nei beto? The b'nei beto is a reference to your wife. And the braita says that if your children or your wife is next to you, lo yikra kriyat shema, you should not read kriyat shema, ela im ken hayat talito mafseket benehen, unless you have a blockage of a blanket of some sort between the bodies. So says Rav Yosef, says the Gemara, elamai itlach lememar. How do you have to reconcile this? Says Rav Yosef, even according to me, according to you, Rabbi Yosef, you need to say it is machloket tanaim. Ishtol Rav Yosef tanaehi. You must say that even reading Shema with having your wife and turning around both in the bed still is machloket tanaim. Because remember, one braita says clearly that if you're with your wife in the bed and you turn around, you could say Shema. That's one braita we just had. And the third braita that we just introduced says, if you are there with Bnei Beto, which is a reference to your wife, you can't say it until there is a hefsek of a blanket covering the bodies separately from each other, and the bodies are not touching. So even Rabbi Yosef has to say that this is machloket between Tanaim. So says Shmuel, once even Rabbi Yosef has to say it's machloket Tanaim, I could also say the same thing. It's machloket Tanaim. So what's the halakha so far? We don't know. So far it's machloket Tanaim. Some say your wife, you could do when the bodies are touching. Some say you can't. Right? So now the halakha the Gemara discusses right now. Says the Gemara. 2 dots. Amar mor. Ze machzir panav vekore kriyat shema. You said that you could turn around and while body's still touching from the back, you could say Shema. So says the Gemara, wait a second. How is that possible? V'ha'ika agavot. You told me that if you have your body touching someone's private area, then you for sure cannot say Shema. So wait a second. Private area is 2 parts. You have the private area in the front, but you have also in the behind. If the agavot, if they're literally their behinds are touching, how is that mutar? That's also private area. How is that mutar? Says the Gemara. Mesaya lel Rav Huna. Gemara says this helps the shita of Rav Huna. The Amar Rav Huna agavot en ba'em mishum erva. That Rav Huna holds that agavot is not considered erva in halacha. Says the Gemara. Let us bring a proof for Rav Huna in the Mishnayot, in Masechet Challah, when we talk about separating challah from the dough, the Mishnah tells us, Haisha yoshevet vekosa, that a woman could sit when she is completely naked. She's not wearing any clothing. The Mishnah says she could still be mafrish challah, take off challah, and say a bracha. So says the Gemara, Isha yoshevet vekosa la chalata aruma. She could do all of this while being naked. Why? Because the area of erva, what's considered erva for her, is covered with the floor when she's sitting down. But the man is more complicated to cover the erva just by mere fact of sitting, where you have no clothing on. And therefore, the man, cannot separate challah and say bracha while being naked. So the Mishnah says. Says the Gemara, in other words, you have a proof from here that even though that she's completely naked, the fact that her private area is covered by the mere fact of sitting down on the ground, that's sufficient, even though that the agavot, the behind, still is seen because she's not covered. And that would be mutar. So let's use this as a raya for Rav Huna, that Rav Huna holds agavot en ba'em mishuv erva, that the behind of a person is not considered halachically erva. Says the Gemara, Tirgam alav Rahman bar Yitzchak, kegon shayu paneh atuchot bekarka. The Gemara says no, it's not necessarily a raya. It's not like a cutting edge raya, so to speak, for the Shita of Rav Huna, because it could be speaking about a case that her body is like submerged a little bit inside the ground. It's a softer ground, or the shape of the body is different in a way that the agavot is also covered, that even her behind is covered with sitting on the ground. Fine. Now that we speak about this, we go back to the braita that we brought of what is considered halachically banav uvene beto ketanim. What is considered the age of being a minor in halacha in regards to this halacha? In other words, we all know that minor and adult in halacha is 12 and 13 plus mideoraita. You really need to have shte se'arot. Just the mere fact that you're 13 years and 1 day, it's not sufficient for being a bar mitzvah in the oraita level. In the Rabbanan level is fine. And we have something called chazakah de rava. Chazakah de rava is that we assume that if you're 13 years and 1 day, you already have 2 se'arot also. So we're not going to ask you to check or ask someone else to check. But in biblical things, imagine if someone's bar mitzvah day is on Parashat Zachor. And we pass Parashat Zachor is the Oraita. So can he be the Chazan reading Parashat Zachor? No. Unless you check him, even though that he has the age, but if you don't know for sure that he has shte sarot, he has 2 hairs, permanent hairs, in the area of erva, he's not considered halachically biblical level an adult. But that's basically the age, 12 for girls, 13 for boys, that they become, biblically speaking, of age. But in this halacha, is not so simple. Says the Gemara, Im hayu banav ubnei beto ktanim mutar. This that you said, if they are minor, then it's mutar, even if they are in bed with you and your body is touching theirs. Ve'ad kama, until when your little kid could be next to you naked and you could still say Shema. Amar Rav Chisda, tinoket bat 3 shanim v'yom echad, v'tinok ben tet shanim v'yom echad. By girls is 3 years and 1 day, and by boys is 9 years and 1 day. Why is this? Because we know in all over Shas, when a person becomes ra'ui lebiyah, when they are fit for minimal age, that the biyah would be a biyah for a boy would be 9 years, and for a girl to have relations to someone that would be considered basically a rape, but it would be considered that they had relation and the betulim is not going to come back, is considered 3 years and one day. So that's the age, says the Gemara, for this. Already, if they're of that age, they're considered an erva in this halacha, and therefore you cannot read Shema if they're not covered. Says the Gemara, Ika de Amri, there are those who say it's even a higher age. It's really the age that people are developed, their physical body is matured and developed enough that causes hirhur, potentially. That someone of that age is desirable for tashmish hamita. So a 3-year-old, a 9-year-old is a kid. You have to have an age that is no longer a kid. They are developing into a boy, a teenager, or a girl, a teenager. It's not like a baby anymore. It's something that would arouse and create hirhur. That is what's asur. So therefore, says the Gemara, tinoket bat yud alef shana, v'yom echad v'tinok ben 12 shana v'yom echad. Each one year earlier than their bar or bat mitzvah. By a girl would be 11 years, by a boy would be 12 years. Says the Gemara, Aidi v'aidi, ad kedei shadayim nachonus arech simeach. This is for, this shita holds that you need the maturity of body in a way that would cause hirhur, and that's why any less than that age would be mutar. Amar le Rav Kana Rav Ashi. Rav Kana told Rav Ashi, Hatam Amar Rava, Afar Gavdet Yufta de Shmuel Hilchata Kevate. You remember yesterday we had in the previous daf that even though that the halacha, the Braita did not seem to be aligned with Shmuel in the topic of having your tefillin under your pillow when your wife is together with you in the bed, that we said the Braita seems to be against Shmuel, and yet halacha, Rava said halacha is like Shmuel. So says the Gemara, can we relate that to here also to say, even though that Shmuel doesn't seem to be very desirable, maybe we should say halacha should be like Shmuel here as well. Again, here is machloket Shmuel and Rav Yosef. Whether or not your wife is a bigger chidush or other people is a bigger chidush. What's the halacha? Is halacha like Shmuel over here as well? Hachamai, says the Gemara. And the answer comes very strong. The Gemara says, what's the connection? Just because one place halacha is like Shmuel, when you're in the bed with your wife, regarding the halacha of tefillin, the kavod of tefillin, does that mean that regarding the halacha of saying Shema, in regards to erva, halacha should be like Shmuel? What's the connection? Yeah, the bed, the wife, the yourself, and the Shmuel are common. But it's totally different sugya. Just because it's the topic of you and your wife being in the bed and Shmuel having a shita over it, doesn't mean the halacha is like Shmuel. That's talking about kavod of tefillin. Here is talking about the halachot of erva. It's completely separate halacha. Therefore, says the Gemara, elahechad itmar itmar. Where it has been said, it's said, ve'echad lo itmar, lo itmar. And where it has not been said, it's not applicable to relate one sugya to another. Amar le Rav Mari, Rav Papa. Now that we spoke about what's considered erva, is agavod, is the person's behind considered erva, it's not considered erva, and the halachot relating to that, the Gemara pauses for a moment to tell us about other areas of the body that are considered erva. Now, any place that's considered private area is considered erva that we know. Now, the halacha has it that any place of a woman's body that has been praised by Shlomo HaMelech in the context of Shir HaShirim is also considered erva. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss some of them, and it's a longer discussion at some point. Maybe we'll have a rate by on this of which one is biblical, which one is rabbinic, but nevertheless, we're going to go through a list of what is considered erva and what is not considered erva. Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Mari le Rav Papa, Se'ar yotze bebigdo mahu. If you have hair that's coming out of your body, a makom of erva. Imagine a person has a garment that has It's a holy garment. It has the cracks and crevices have, the way it's woven, it's open, and some hair of the private area is poking out. So you see the hair, you don't see the irva. Is that considered the se'ar of irva? Is that considered irva? Or is that not considered halachically irva? Says the Gemara, se'ar yotze bebigdo mahu. Kara aleh, he called upon him se'ar se'ar. He said, no, you could say this, you could say se'ar the whole day, Rashi says, and that's not considered irva. It's not considered irva. Even though it's a part of the area of irva, and it's poking out, you can see the hair, it's not considered irva, and therefore you're fine. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Now it's a famous Gemara over here about what parts of body are considered halachically irva. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, tefach beisha irva. A tefach in the body of a woman that is darka lechasot, says Rashi, that is usually covered, is considered irva. Tefach is about 8 centimeters. One fist. 8 centimeters of a body of a woman is showing is considered irva. And what is it considered irva for? The Gemara is going to discuss in just a moment. What do you mean it's irva? Irva means nakedness. That's what it means, right? The word irva means nakedness. So fine. So you told me it's considered nakedness. So what the halacha is? What are you telling me? Are you telling me not to look at it? Would I even think that it is mutar to look at it? Is that the halacha? Or are you saying that I can't say Shema in front of it, I can't say drasha in front of it, I can't say bracha in front of it? What exactly are you teaching me? That's going to be the next question of the Gemara. But says Rav Yitzchak, tefach be'isha irva. That amount of a woman's body, if it's exposed in a place that usually should be covered, is considered irva. Says the Gemara, lemai. For what halacha? Ilemale istakuliba. If you are teaching me the halacha that you cannot gaze, you cannot look intently at that part of a person's body, Veha Amar Rav Sheshat already has told me, Lama mana katuv tachshitin shebachutz in tachshitin shebifnim. Why does the Torah, the pasuk, count the jewelry outside, worn outside on the body, together with jewelry that was worn inside in the private area? This is referring to the pasuk after Milchemet Midyan, after they took revenge of the Midianites. They brought all of the jewelry that they took as booty from the Milchama, from the war, to Moshe Rabbeinu. And then the Torah goes out of its way to count the names of the jewelries, and it's talking about the necklace and the bracelets and the rings and all those, these nose rings and the finger rings. And then he counts also kumaz. Kumaz was a piece of jewelry that women wore on their private area, covered. So it says Rav Sheshat, why does the Torah count them together when it comes to mentioning the Tachshitei Midyan? There's no reason for the Torah to count what type of jewelry they took. Who cares? They melted it anyways. So why do you have to tell me what type of jewelry they had? The only reason, says Rav Sheshat, is coming to teach you halakha. Is coming to teach you kol hamistakel be'etzba ktana shel isha. Any person that gazes intently, looks at a woman even on their pinky, on a small finger, ke'ilu mistakel b'makom hatoref. It's tantamount, is equivalent of looking at her private area. If you draw benefit, you are gazing intently for pleasure at even a finger of a woman, it's considered you are violating a Torah law of not looking at erva. So you're telling me tefach beisha. Forget about tefach. Even a pinky is asur. I know that already. So you can't be teaching me tefach beisha erva. Rabbi Yitzchak cannot be teaching me a tefach beisha erva, because I already know even less than that is asur if I am having thoughts that are negative looking at someone's wife. So that for sure we know. So what is it coming to teach me then? Says the Gemara. Ela beishto. It's talking about your own wife. Looking at nakedness of one's own wife in an area that usually should be covered, and now it's not. If a tefach of her body is uncovered, you cannot say Shema in front of it. Now, it's mutar to look at it, so your wife. But you can't be saying Dvarim Shebi Kedusha, you can't be saying Shema if you are in front of Erva. That's the halakha that is teaching you. Not for looking, but the fact that if you're exposed, not even looking at it, if you're exposed to Erva, is right in front of you, you cannot be saying Shema. Why? Because it says, Lo yera'eh becha ervat davar, v'shav ma'acharecha. It should not be ervat davar, dibur, when you say dibur of kedusha, when you say divrei Torah, or when you're saying a bracha, you're saying Shema, you're reading the Torah, you're learning Gemara. You cannot have, in your camp, you cannot have erva exposed, even if you're not looking. Now, this becomes a question, how can you get around it? In the halakha, it's three-way machloket acharonim. Some say, if you close your eyes, already is fine. Others say, no. Lo yera'eh becha means you shouldn't be able to see. So therefore, you have to at least turn your face around. And others say, even your face is not enough, you have to turn around. The Amud Yomi actually had a tshuva. He was asked once in Argentina to be Mesader Kiddushin. And this is Rabbi Yosef told me the story. You see, Aradia was a tremendous personality of warmth and just amazing warmth, yet. But yet, there's a longer story attached to this, not for now necessarily, but he was asked to go and officiate a wedding of one of the biggest billionaires in Argentina. He made a Tanai with Chacham Obadia. Obadia needed some favor for a different Rav, not even for himself. I said, okay, I'll do it if you come and do Mesader. She said, I'd be too Torah for me. I said, no, so he came. And Rabbi Yosef was very young back then. He was with him. And Harvadia goes in, he says, people are not dressed properly. The woman's shoulders are showing, and that's considered erva, right? So Harvadia says, I'm not being Mr. Derkish. She walked out. Can you imagine, like the mayor, and the everyone, all the officials, the goyim were there, right? And Rabbi Yosef said, I was cringing, I was shivering in my pants. So why the 500 or 600 people are here? The governor is here, the mayor is here. All the billionaires are here. What do you mean you're not doing it? It's like the chuppah is ready. So I says, no, they're not covered. I can't say bracha in front of this. So people were talking, it's not coming, it's getting late. So the governor, whatever, asked around, said, why is the hacham not coming in? So they told him, he said, because he says, the women are not covered properly. It's not the proper setting for him to say bracha. He says, he's right. The goy says, he's right. Get handkerchiefs for everyone, put a shawl on everyone, and Chacham should come and do it. The goy says it, you do it, right? So they got shawls for everyone, everyone covered, and he came and he said the bracha. So that's really, Chaim Yosef was saying this to show the strength of Harvadia's character. So when he needed to put his foot down, even though that he was so nice and so warm and he was the most lenient and he found leniencies, the truth is, Chacham wrote a Tshuva in Yabia Omer to allow such a situation. But he himself didn't want to do it. He allowed it by covering the eyes, whatever it is, close your eyes and say it. He was very lenient, but himself didn't want to do it. He wanted to make a point. So nevertheless, it's because of this halakha of tefach ba'isha erva. And says the Gemara, be'ishto u'lekriyat shema. It's talking about your wife and at the time of Kriyat Shema. So this is a different sugya, not to be mixed up with gazing at erva, but rather having erva exposed to you when you are saying Dvarim Shebikdusha. When erva is in front of you, you cannot say bracha, you cannot say, so again, this becomes a question now for mohalim. If you're a moher, how are you allowed to say bracha if the erva of the kid is open over there? Do you have to cover it? Do you have to not cover it? Those are very interesting topics that we're going to discuss with Hashem tomorrow morning.